Hey, shalom, shalom. Hayawam tawab la'atam, which is good day unto you all. Anachna wa ha'i barisha Allah, we the Hebrew Israelites coming to you week in and week out through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, to preach to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indian Haitians, and Israelite foreigners. Nachamatam, Kaya, Hamlakam, Hashamayim, Kwa repent ye for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, first and foremost, before we get started. We're going to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rocha HaKodash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught us his truth and rule well, and much respect to you bros out there pushing this truth with all righteousness and sincere shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
So this is another edition of Hadabar Shal Hayawam, which Hadabar is the word, Shal is of, Hayawam is the day or today. All right, and so number 56. All right, and the word is Chaazah, in which the word Chaazah comes from the Hebrew word Chaz, which we got on the screen. And it says Chaz, it says see, hold, perceive, look. It says vision, light, haven. It says the ability to see beyond what is seen in the physical present as a light piercing through the darkness. It says the cutting down of the wall allows one to pass through to the other side. It says a vision is the cutting down of the fence to perceive what is on the other side. Now, being that it says a fence is because when we look at the Hebrew letter cha, it goes into a wall or a fence. All right. So that's why it says a fence. But then it says a zah because the zah, it represents a tool or a weapon. And you know, with tools and weapons, you cut things. So pretty much if a wall is right there, vision is pretty much the ability to cut down that wall so you can see what's on the other side. Hence the reason for it. In Edenics, you got words like gaze, which gaze is to stare intently pretty much. All right, then you also have haze, which is the vision is obscured, but you can kind of hear it in the phonetic sound. Chaazah, gaze, and haze. The za part comes from Chaazah. They just changed the cha into a h or a ha, and it became haze and gaze. But right here it says the feminine version of that. It says Chaazah, and it says look into, to peer toward. It says relationship to root, a perception beyond the normal experiences. Did you want to touch on that, bro?
Yeah, Khan. I just want to touch on where it says Chaazah. So it says vision, light, haven. It says the ability to see beyond what is seen in the physical present as a light piercing through the darkness. And the scriptures talk about this word being a light. And those that believe in this word, because the thing about this word is that it speaks about prophetic events, things that we haven't seen yet, things that hasn't happened yet, things that we have to actually put our faith and trust in, and hope for these things to come to pass, right? But I want to get this real quick, just to add to that point. Hebrews 11 and verse 1, it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Right. So that's that light. That's that what they call it, vision. That how does that word go? Chaazah.
Chaazah.
Chaazah. Right. So that's that vision. And again, just touching back on that Hebrews. Let me read this again. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Right.
Right.
Because
You go.
it's like, go ahead.
Because pretty much just to land back on you, it says now faith is the substance of things hoped for, because what niggas in the world say, if I don't see it, I don't believe it. So
Right.
it says now faith is the substance of things hoped for. Now people that's in the world, they essentially, their substance is what they actually can see. Now what's the scripture say in Hebrews? Could you get that real fast? We'll go back to that. Hebrews 4:2. Baba Kashah.
Con. Salakia. My feet got cut off a little bit.
You good.
Con. But where'd you stop at?
Hebrews 4:2.
Okay, Con. Well, I got another one to back that up. This is let me see, if 2 and 8. Because again, this truth or this faith and not of yourselves. It is a gift of the Most High. So not to everybody is this given to, the vision, the eye salve to be able to see the things that we're reading about, right? Because here it is, we're talking about war, we're talking about MOTB, future things, that to the world it might seem like it's far out, like the scripture. In the world there's a saying, reality is stranger than fiction, but not a lot of people is able to perceive these things that we're talking about. Robots coming into the streets, monitoring people, implants into your bodies, chariots, so-called UFOs coming down and delivering the elect. These are things that's like far out there. So you're
Mm-hmm.
going to need that spiritual insight, that spiritual, how should I say, that spiritual foresight to be able to see these things and believe in them. And that comes through that faith, through that vision, right?
Right. Could you get Hebrews 4:2?
Con. This is Hebrews 4 and verse 2. It says, but unto preach did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it.
Right. So it says, for unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them, talking about 2/3. But the word preached did not profit them. All right, 2/3 of it, the word didn't profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. So ultimately it's falling upon, deaf ears. They don't have that vision. That's why scriptures say where there is no vision, that people perish. I'm gonna get this real fast. Back to Proverbs
Mhm.
29 and 18, it says, where there is no vision, all right, no perceptory vision, all right, no actual spiritual vision, all right. It says where there is no vision, the people perish. 2/3 are going to perish, you see, because they can't hide themselves effectively, all right, from what's coming upon the planet Earth, because they lack spiritual foresight. It says, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he, and ultimately happy is the elect, because they're able to see what's going to happen in the future through the spirit, because it's mixed with faith. All right, and ultimately they're able to hide themselves, pursuant to, I believe it's Proverbs the 22nd chapter. So can we go back to that Hebrews 11, run that back?
Con. May I get a quick preset for you, because you mentioned this.
You go ahead.
Let me get this real quick, Salakia. This is Proverbs 22 and verse 3. It says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. You can break it down.
Khan says a prudent man, prudent goes into somebody that's wise. A smart man is going to foresee the evil, because ultimately through faith. All right, again, going into the word Chaazah. All right, the main two parts of that is Chaz. The Cha goes into offense. The Za goes into Baba Shah. Could you get we'll come back to this. Could you go to the Word document?
Oh yeah, con.
Because we talked about Chaz, again, the main two letters, all right, but then the Ha is on the actual word that we're going into, Chaazah. So it says Cha, the wall, the Za is a weapon, and weapons cut. All right, then it says a Ha, which is Ha Na. It says behold, to look attentively. So it says wall is cut down, behold. So it says the ability to see beyond what is seen in the physical present as a light. That's the light we was mentioning. It says as a light piercing through the darkness, the cutting down of the wall allows one to pass through to the other side. A vision is the cutting down of the fence to perceive what is on the other side. It says those with vision can see what is beyond the fence, i.e., that will go into the prophets. That's why, in the old times, which we'll get out of Tazah, the prophets, they was called seers, because they essentially could see the visions that the Lord, the prophecies, they can see the oracles of the Lord, the things that the Lord had planned are in the future. So going back to Proverbs 22 and 3, it said, a prudent man foreseeth the evil. All right, he can see past that fence. He can see past what, these people, he can see past the vision that they ultimately can see, because it's mixed with faith. It says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil. All right, Eve goes into a time ill is bad. He can see, he can see the bad times pretty much approaching. It says, and hideth himself. Where is he hiding himself? He's hiding himself in his truth, because that's essentially how the elect is going to be protected, by confiding in the Lord. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. It says, but the simple pass on and are punished. Hey, the simple they're gonna pass that wall. They don't see the danger. they running head first past the gate. They only seeing with the two eyes that they got in their head. They don't have any spiritual foresight, and that's essentially why they're going to be destroyed. 2/3.
Con. That's the reason why the prophets are very important. Because again, they're pretty much the spiritual forecasters. They're able to see ahead of time and be able to give the warning down to the people. The scriptures in Ezekiel 7, it talks about the man on top of the watchtower, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much they're the ones that's keeping watch over the entire city, over the nation. That's why
Right.
the prophets are very important in these times.
Right. Could we get could you go to that article?
Con. Let me increase the size.
And it says Chaazah, it's a vision. It says look and see. You skip down, Baba Kusha.
Mm-hmm.
And you got two types of vision in Hebrew, or two words specifically that go into vision is ra'ah. Ra'ah is to see, like, okay, I can see, my hand. All right, Chaazah is perception. See, okay, I can see that. I can picture that. I can imagine that. So it's a little difference in the two. The Chaazah specifically goes into like a vision.
Mm-hmm.
But can you skip down, Baba Kusha?
Con.
We can start at the one that says it goes into Ezekiel, the 12th chapter. You can stop right there, Baba Kusha.
Con.
Because you got a couple different prophecies as they list right here, but it says Chaazah as vision. It says at least 3 of the prophets' books start off with an announcement about a vision or divine seeing, and they quote Isaiah 1:1. It says the vision of Isaiah the son of Amos concerning Judah and Jerusalem, which he saw during the reign of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So this was a specific vision, a perceptory vision, something that they were able to imagine, something that they could see,
Mm-hmm.
as it was something in the future. Amos 1:1, it says, the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. All right, and which I'm not sure of the version that they use, but in so many words, it pretty much goes into a vision. All right, right here, Micah 1:1, it says the words of Yahweh, which came to Mayakah of Morsheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw Chaazah concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. All right, and then you can scroll down a little bit, Papa Kusha. Then it has right here. I'm gonna actually get that real fast. This is Isaiah chapter 30, and we'll start at verse 9, and it says that this is a rebellious people. Verse 8, it says, now go write it before them, Isaiah 30:8. Now go write it before them in a table and note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come forever and ever. Talking about the scriptures. It says
Mm-hmm.
that this is a rebellious people, lying children that will not hear the law of the Lord. This is the ones that's not mixed, that don't have the faith ultimately to essentially serve the Lord. Verse 10, which say to the seers, the ones that can see the vision, see not. All right, they say, hey, don't perceive that. They would rather, Jake, they would rather the prophets essentially not have the ability to say what's going to come in the future, because that's going to burst 2/3 bubble. They love it in captivity. So it says, which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. It says, get you out of the way, turn aside out of the path, cause the Holy One of Israel to cease from before us. Verse 12, it says, wherefore thus saith the Holy One of Israel, because ye despise this word and trust in oppression. 2/3, they love oppression. They love, Egypt. They love Assyria. It says, and which, when I say Egypt and Assyria, pretty much Egypt, Exodus 20 and 2, that represents bondage. All right, they love the so-called benefits of slavery. All right, they love to serve their oppressors. It says, and
Mm-hmm.
trust in oppression and perverseness. Jake loved to be perverse and stay thereon. It says, therefore, this iniquity shall be to you as a breach ready to fall, swelling out in a high wall, whose breaking cometh suddenly, at an instant, you know, which this can be applied to, you know, essentially, you know, to where this place essentially reaches a societal collapse, you know, because you got Jake entrusting, all right, and in a you know, I'm gonna get this in the so like, I'm gonna read this in the NLT, verse 13, Isaiah 30 and 13, and it says, "Calamity will come upon you suddenly, like a bulging wall that bursts and falls," in which you essentially try to trust in a wall, all right, but essentially 2/3 they trusting in a wall that's not gonna stand, you know, so they would rather, you know, being that the prophets is giving the attempting to give them the vision, you know, they rather be blind and, you know, again rely on deceptions and you know, not abide in reality. But in
Mm-hmm.
LT again it says, "Calamity will come upon you suddenly, like a bulging wall that bursts and falls. In an instant, it will collapse and come crashing down." You know, that's why I said, where there is no vision, the people perish. You know, and they're willingly perishing. You know.
Right. You know, the scriptures talk about. As a matter of fact, may I read this?
Mm-hmm.
This is Romans 1 and verse 28. It says, "And even as they did not retain the power, retain so like even as they did not like to retain the Most High in their knowledge, the Most High gave them over to reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers." So all these are a list of attributes that we see in Jake take hold of right now, right? 2/3, you know, they're filled with all this. But it says, backbiters, haters of the Most High, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful. But this is the point, who knowing the judgment of the Most High, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. So whenever you go back to Isaiah 30 and 9, it says well, pretty much 30 and 9 to 13, it pretty much talks about how to tell the prophets to not, you know, prophesy unto them right things, but prophesy smooth things. Pretty much they're really telling, you know, the seers, the visionaries, not to pretty much to turn a blind eye, you know, to the vision,
Right. That's
right?
why I say right here. Use done.
Not to visualize, pretty much. But you
So,
got it.
so
Oh no, you got it. Go ahead.
kind of, that's why I say right here. To add to your point, it says these people wanted to see what was not there. They didn't want to hear the truth. They preferred to be presented with false illusions so they could live happily in ignorance. And you know, ignorance is bliss. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's that. You know, that's pretty much the statement they live after. You scroll down, Baba Shah, a little bit.
Con. But when you go back to Romans 1:32, it pretty much is talking about it says they have pleasure in them that do them. So they want you know, the prophets to partake in their folly. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
They want us to be a part of their bullshit, you know. So seeing that we aren't, that's why the scripture says, you know, it might become your enemy because I tell you the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, well, really, they became the Most High's enemies, which in turn makes us their enemies, you know. So again, this is the reason why judgment is that vision that we're proclaiming, the vision of destruction, the vision of death and calamity, you know, is being brought out because uh, I mean, the prophets were always only sent out, like it says in Amos 3 and 7. You know, how's it go? The Most High sent us as prophets.
I'm gonna get it
Oh, the
for you.
Most High does nothing. Con, Babu Shah.
It's Amos 3 and verse. I'm gonna start at verse 6. This is Amos 3 and 6. It says, "Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Shall there be evil in the city, and the Lord hath not done it?"
Right. So the trumpet is being blown right now, but we're seeing, you know, Jake ain't, you know, they ain't taking heed to the message. You know, back in the ancient world, when they saw a prophet coming into the streets or into the neighborhood, you know, people would tremble with fear. At least whenever the society, whenever Jake's society was actually in his right state of mind. But
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, you know, we're seeing that shit has gone far left to where they mock and scoff the prophets. They misuse the prophets. They see us
Right.
as being a laughing stock. You know what I'm saying? Where they use us as a form of of comedy and, you know what I'm saying, they're joking around. This is deadly serious.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're seeing all these earthquakes, all these catastrophes. Goddamn, Jake getting goddamn uh, wrangled up and tossed back to damn Mexico or whatever, or these different different like Guantanamo Bay, for example, in El Salvador. You know what I'm saying? These are all things coming because you know of the evil that's been proclaimed on our people because of their disobedience. You know, uh, pretty much all that. But you got it, bro.
Verse 7, it says, surely the Lord power will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets.
Right. So before the Most High does anything, he always sends his men out to prophesy what the Lord is about to do. Right. And we've been prophesying about this from our apostles and elders on down. They've been prophesying of this evil that we're seeing build up in society right now. That's really targeted to you tribes.
Mm-hmm. I got this right here. Because pretty much, Jake, when we got in Isaiah, the 30th chapter, Jake would rather, the prophets not bring out, these things, you see, because Jake want to abide. See, what Jake do is, in these times, you got Jake in that mindset, oh, I don't watch the news. The news is just nothing but, doom and gloom. Jake just want to be in a little bubble and just be comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
But this is Jeremiah chapter 28 and verse 8, because this serves as the message essentially that all the prophets come out with. It's Jeremiah chapter 28 and verse 8. It says the prophets that have been before, excuse me, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old, both prophesied, of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms of war and of evil and of pestilence. And everybody had the same message, starting from the garden. Everybody has had the same message,
Right.
America, Babylon the Great, all right, is a great kingdom. All right. Essentially, all the prophets spoke of war. All right. WW3, all right, of evil, Eve going into a time, ill is bad, of pestilence. We seeing a rise in pestilence, but that's pretty much that pretty much serves as the message that each prophet has always came out with, and that's the vision that Jake has always tried to shy away from.
Mm-hmm.
So
they pretty much seek after a false vision.
Mm-hmm.
But you got it.
Jake walking around, covering up the eyes,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Could you get that's on the screen, Ezekiel 12 and start at verse
Oh yeah.
23.
Want me to get it in the King James?
Well, actually, I'm gonna read it right here.
Mm-hmm.
But it says, I got it in the KJV too right here. But it says on the screen, it says, but tell them the days draw near, as well as the fulfillment of every vision. All right, talking about the prophecies. For there will no longer be any false vision or flattering divination within the house of Israel. For I, Yahweh, will speak, and whatever word I will speak will be performed. And because pretty much Jake wasn't entrusted into the visions, you see, because it wasn't blessed with the faith. So it says, it will no longer be delayed, for in your days, O rebellious house, I will speak the word and perform it, declares the Lord Yahweh. Furthermore, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, behold, the house of Yasha'Allah is saying, the vision that he sees is for many years from now, and he prophesies of times far off. Therefore say to them, thus says the Lord, none of my words will be delayed any longer. Whatever word I speak will be performed, declares the Lord Yahweh. And pretty much, Jake was in that mindset, oh, that ain't going to be in my lifetime. That's going to be in my kid's lifetime, because Jake didn't really want to hold themselves accountable, pursuant to John, the 19th chapter. You see, but we in the times right now to where, hey, the visions is speaking. I'm going to get this real fast. This is Habakkuk. Chapter 2, we'll get verse 1. It says, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower. You see, because what's going on? He said, I will stand upon my watch. All right, because watching, you're watching out for current events, matching up with prophecy, you see, because the watchmen are blessed, all right, with their eyesight, pursuant to Isaiah 62 and 6. I've set watchmen upon thy walls, O Jerusalem, which shall never hold their peace. It's not like, the prophets, because we talking about the wall. It's not like the prophets is standing. It's not like the prophets stand behind the wall. The prophets are standing on top of that wall. They can see. They got the vision to see past that wall.
Right.
They stand on top of that wall. They can see what's on the other side. So essentially the watchman is like the spiritual weatherman, the spiritual forecasters, saying, hey, this is what's going on out here. We need to be doing this. And that's pretty much the job of the prophet. So that's why it says right here, Habakkuk 2 and verse 1, it says, I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower and will watch to see what he will say unto me and what I shall answer when I am reproved. Verse 2, and the Lord answered me and said, write the vision. Okay, so because what's going on? Like, all right, spiritual warfare. All right, you stand on top of the wall. What's going on the other side of the wall? Like what are you seeing? You seeing the prophecies. What the Lord saying? All right, it's pretty much that's being deep. That's being jotted down. It says, and the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables. When something's being made plain, somebody you had passed down notes. Like you write an accurate report. Okay, you're not going to say, oh, I felt this way, and the third. No, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. This is what we need to do. So it's being made plain upon tables, so that the elect can understand ultimately what's going on these times and what the elect need to do. So it says, and the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. It says, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak. Each prophecy has a specific time that's going to happen. All right, it says, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. All right, going back to Ezekiel the 12th chapter, because pretty much 2/3 they felt as if they couldn't actually see it with their two eyes. They didn't have the spiritual foresight. So they couldn't see into the future. All right, so it says, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie, though it tarry. Wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. So essentially, these visions are surely coming. They're not tarrying. Because Scripture say this right here. I'm gonna get this real fast, bro. If you ain't had nothing.
No, go ahead.
This is Second Esdras, chapter 9. All right, and we'll get verse 1. It says, he answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou seest part of the signs past, which I've told thee before, seest, we're going into the word vision. It says, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. The end was prophesied from the beginning. For like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. It's manifest. It's obvious. You can see it. It's manifest. Going back to Ezekiel the 12th chapter. Because Jake, was murmuring. 2/3 Jake was murmuring. Like it felt as if, hey, that's not going to happen in my lifetime. Well, that can no longer be said. Because the end is manifest. You can see it now.
Yo, it's crazy, because when you really picture it, like the Most High paints a good picture. As far as like being the watchman, you're a watchman, you're on top of the tower, you're on top of the wall, you're able to see what is going on the other side of the wall. The people on the bottom, they can't see. 2/3 they can't see what's going on, because the wall is blocking their view, right? So we're over here telling them what's going on. They're telling us, nah, you're lying. They're telling us, nah, you're crazy. You pretty much, they're telling us you're not seeing what you're actually seeing. Yeah, who are they to tell us when they can't see?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That just shows you how should I say it? How much
ignorant
in denial pretty much Jake is.
Right. Willingly, the scriptures say Jake is willingly ignorant.
Yeah. Willingly ignorant, man. They choose not to know. They'd rather not know. They rather us, like we just read, right? In what was it, Ezekiel? No, was it
Isaiah 30?
Isaiah 30. Pretty much, they'd rather us, not speak of the vision that we're seeing. They'd rather us speak unto them smooth things. Hey, come down from that tower, man, and come join us, man. Like, fuck all that shit. That's pretty much what they're telling us. But you got it.
God, I got two more, and that'll be it. Because we're speaking about the vision. Could you get Isaiah 29, and we'll start at verse 10?
Let's see. Isaiah 29 and verse 10, it says, for Yahweh hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes.
Because we talking about the vision. Those that got their eyes open, hey, they represent the prophets. That's the seers.
Mm-hmm. It says, the prophets and your rulers, the seers, had he covered.
And that's pretty much going again, going into the false prophets. False
Right.
prophets, they're not blessed with the vision. Those that got their eyes open. That those are the true prophets. Those the false prophets, they're not blessed. With the eye salve.
Right. Pretty much these prophets that's talking about here are the ones that 2/3 cleave unto.
Mm-hmm.
But it
They
says verse
represent
11.
they represent guys like so-called pastors.
Mm-hmm.
So-called Christian pastors. Because this pretty much the spirit that they in right here, and starting at verse 11.
Mm-hmm. So verse 11, it says, "In the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying,
Right,
read
because
this."
they supposed to be learned. They go to these theologian schools, cemetery schools. What they call it? It's called a seminary school, or
Yeah, seminary school. Yep.
yes, something like that. Yeah, but they supposed to be learned. It says, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, "Read this, I pray thee." And he saith, I cannot, for it is learned. They won't touch on the mysteries of the scriptures. You see, because that vision is not given unto them. Verse 12, it says, and the book is delivered to him that is not learned, because he not truthfully learned. It says, saying, "Read this, I pray thee." And he saith, I am not, excuse me, and he saith, I am not learned. So pretty much, those in that specific type of spirit, they're not learned because they haven't been given the ability to have Chaazah, the vision. Chaz, that wall, Zah goes into to cut down, past that wall to see what's on the other side. And then the Ha at the end is behold, behold, because you're looking attentively at, what specifically is happening in the future times. They haven't been given that vision, that ability, to essentially prophesy, to essentially go into Proverbs 22 and 3. A prudent man perceiveth the evil and hide themselves. They can't hide themselves, you see, because they don't ultimately have a vision.
Right. Hey, and I can attest to this too, because I remember when I used to be, because I grew up in the Catholic Church. I went to Sunday school and all that shit. And whenever you ask the because the pastor will come in sometimes, and he'll talk to us, and I will have questions. Like, I will always ask questions on like prophecy, especially the Book of Revelations, and he will always say that book is sealed. So
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much that precept right there to the T. They just don't know. It wasn't given unto them.
God, I
But
got
oh,
slot.
Slocky, go ahead, bro.
Now you finish your point.
No, I was gonna get this real quick. This is a clairvoyant, right? And this is what the prophets this is like a spiritual power that we have, the ability to see. But I'm gonna read this real quick. It says a clairvoyant is a person who claims to have the ability to perceive things beyond the normal range of senses, often associated with psychic abilities, seeing the future, or perceiving events at a distance. The term comes from the French word clairvoyance, meaning clear seeing.
Mm-hmm.
See, and that's a sense of like almost a sense like a spiritual power, man. Being able to see the things that we're reading about, the prophecies, and being able to, believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sense of a spiritual power in itself. Like we read
Right.
about how faith is faith um is a gift, pretty much, and is
Mm-hmm.
given to the Most High. So this spiritual power that we've been given is ultimately, all to the power, to the will and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua at the end of the day. But
Mm-hmm.
just real quick, I'll finish this out. It says clairvoyance is considered a sixth sense or psychic ability that allows a person to perceive information beyond the five physical senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. So yeah, you got it, bro.
Kind of tied to we got Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Because 2/3, they need to, Jake be in that mindset again. To reiterate, hey, if I don't see it, I don't believe it. So that's pretty much how 2/3 think. Whereas in this faith, ultimately that faith is the substance. What we need, to ultimately see past that wall. It went into Hebrews 4:2.
Mm,
Going into faith being that engine that can you get it again? Actually, I'll read
uh,
it. And then could you get First Samuel 9:9? This is Hebrews
God.
chapter 4 and verse 2. It says, "For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them," talking about 2/3 not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. You see, so essentially 2/3 they're abiding in whatever false sense of confidence they got, you see. But ultimately, the prophets, they have the prophets have the vision, all right, and it's profiting with the F, Profit, pretty much it's profiting in the prophets, you see, because it's mixed with faith.
Mm-hmm. Con. This is 1 Samuel 9 and verse 9. It says, before in Israel, when the man went to inquire of the Most High, thus he spake, come and let us go to the seer, for he that is now called a prophet was before time called a seer.
Because pretty much, in the ancient times, pretty much the prophets was called seers because they was blessed to have a vision. That's why can you get that precept? They had asked Samuel, they was like, comest thou peacefully? Cause
Oh yeah.
what all the prophets come preaching? We got Jeremiah 28:8. The prophets that have been before me and before thee of old spoke against many countries and great kings of war and of evil and of pestilences. So that's the message that the prophets came with, and that's essentially why they was in the spirit right here. It say 1 Samuel 16:4, and it says, and Samuel did that which the Lord spake, and came to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, comest thou peaceably? So pretty much, they understood it was understood, in the ancient world that essentially the prophets came with a specific message, and they understood that, hey, it was pretty much, it was serious times, but Jake
Mm-hmm.
not like that, nowadays. Jake want to be, into folly and bullshit, excessively.
Mm-hmm. It's just like we read in Jeremiah, right? The prophets before time, and the prophets before me and the prophets before thee prophesied both against many countries of war, evil, and a pestilence. So that's pretty much what the message of the prophets: war,
Hmm.
evil, and pestilences. So of course, whenever they saw Samuel coming, they were all scared, man. They were trembling, like, oh shit. Like, they were
Hmm.
probably thinking that judgment was about to come upon them.
Right. But Kyle, that was pretty much all I had, bro. If you had nothing else.
I have one more precept. I was holding this and get it real quick because we talked about that vision, right? And we talked about how pretty much it wasn't given unto 2/3. This is 1 Corinthians 2. Let me see, where do I start? I'll start at 12. It says, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the spirit which is of the Most High, that we might know the things that were freely given unto us of the Most High. And what's that? This truth, right? The understanding of the scriptures, the foresight of the prophecies, the breakdown of the prophecies, right? But it says, verse 13, which things also we speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teacheth, but which the Holy Spirit teacheth, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. But the natural man, 2/3, receiveth not the things of the Spirit of the Most High, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. So that's why, Yahweh Shah, whenever he was on the scene, he always mentioned these people as being people who eyes who can't see and ears who can't hear. Because again, they're natural men. They to them it wasn't given the ability to perceive these things. The supernatural ability that we got, because it might not seem supernatural, but really it is. You know what I'm saying? It's a type of spiritual power that we receive from the Most High to be able to know and understand these pretty much the will of the Lord.
Right. It's a spiritual superpower, because like you got two sets of eyes. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you got the physical eyes, in which the scriptures say the physical eyes always gonna want something. So those in the world, they're essentially looking after what their eyes is lusting for. So they more so pay attention to the physicality of life. They're into the folly of life. With the spiritual eyes, essentially, we start to live, after the spirit. So sometimes, we may be so busy, we might forget. It was a so-called celebrity. They was like, they were so busy on stage or whatever, they forgot that they ate. So
Mm.
pretty much, essentially, we're tapped into that spiritual food, and that's what we focused on. That's pretty much the point that I wanted to get was we're focused and we're intently, focused on the Lord. So we're not worried about what's in this world. Whereas 2/3 they're worried about essentially their lust and whatever their eyes can essentially grab.
Right. Hey, that's the reason why Yahushua said, I am not of this world. you know,
Mm-hmm.
and us, coming being part of Yahweh's, body, and pretty much us, partaking in the most in Yahweh's teachings. We're coming the same steed. We're more gradually day in day. We're detaching from this world. We're becoming a more and more separate from this world. You know,
Mm-hmm.
which allows us to perceive more the things in the spirit. You know,
Right. To be carnally minded is death. To be spiritually minded is life and peace. And that's why the scriptures say we get it real fast. We can close. We ain't had nothing, bro.
con, I ain't got nothing.
Could you get Matthew 6 and I think it's 23?
Con. Matthew 6 and verse 23, it says, "But if thine eye be evil, thy
You
whole
start 22.
body." Con. Verse 22, it says, "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light."
Right. So the light, going into, this truth, if it says the light of the body is the eye, if therefore thine eye be single, if you focus, it says thy whole body shall be full of light. You're going to be illuminated. You see, in which, this light essentially leads us forth into the kingdom. Could you get one more?
Mm-hmm.
Could you get Proverbs 4 and I think 18?
As a spirit.
It say, it says, but the path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. So scriptures say essentially, the world is dark. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially the elect, have the eye salve. So during these times, essentially the elect is growing. So it says, but the path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more until the perfect day. So ultimately that eye salve is increasing. And that's because the elect is focused, all right, and ultimately abiding, all right, in that true vision.
And it's heavy too when it mentions that, it says at more and more unto the perfect day. Whenever the sun rises, the sun comes up and you see it, the sun start barely, starts coming up from the horizon. You see the light and everything coming, piercing through. But then the light doesn't reach its full maximum until the sun is at its highest, at its
Mm-hmm.
perfect position at top. That's pretty much a representation of the elect. When
Mm-hmm.
the sun is brightest and the light shining everything, like that's how we're being built up.
Mm-hmm.
That's how
God,
our path is being laid out.
right. Could you get Proverbs 29 and get verse 18?
Proverbs 29 and 18.
Mm-hmm.
Con. Proverbs 29 and 18, it says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he."
Right. Where there is no vision, the people perish because they can't see. They didn't want to essentially keep their eyes single. You see, so they're gonna perish. Or it says, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. So essentially, the elect, being that they're keeping the ways of the Lord and fearing the Lord. Ultimately the elect is gonna abide happy. The elect's gonna be abide happy in these times. That we coming up into. You see, because ultimately the elect again have their eyes off, and pursuant to Proverbs 22 and 3. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. So for foreseeing the evil, or the bad times coming upon the planet Earth, are essentially the elect is going to hide themselves in this truth, and confide in the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Hey, may I get one more?
Yeah, you good.
This is Psalms 119 and 105. It says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." So with this truth, this is how you're able to see your path. This is how you're able to visualize what the pretty much the roadblocks, the obstacles in front of you. You know, because like we mentioned, we're heading down a time period where it's going to be complete darkness. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to need a light to guide us and where we should go. 2/3 they're going to be in complete gross darkness to where they're not going to know what's in front of them. Like an obstacle is going to appear in front of them, whether it be famine, whether it be soldiers coming down, whether it be whatever it might be that the scriptures talk about that is going to come upon pretty much 2/3 of our people. They're gonna It's gonna come upon them, and they're not gonna know what to do. They're not gonna know how to deal with it. They're not gonna know what the hell is going on. But unto us that have that spiritual foresight, that have that light, we're able to see these things, and act accordingly. Like you mentioned, the righteous or the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
hide. We're going to take cover and shelter in the name of the Lord. Because we know, hey, that's where the protection lies. We have that guidance that's showing us, hey, this is the way. Walk this way.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Con. And we can end it off with that. Because it say this right here, Psalms 119 and 105, it says non, in which non is a seed. All right, seed represents life, but it also represents continuance. So we're able to continue on that path, all right, by abiding in that light, because it's pretty much lighting, it's lighting the path. That's why we're able to, hey, don't do this, don't do that. We're ultimately able to continue, all right, through the spirit, because essentially, we're abiding in the word, we're abiding in that vision.
Mm-hmm.
We're trusting the true sense of awareness, the ultimate sense of awareness.
Right. Right.
Could you get Jeremiah 6:16, then we go ahead and close.
Con. This is Jeremiah 6 and verse 16. It says, "Thus saith Yahweh, stand ye in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way, and walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk therein."
Right. So it says, "Thus saith the Lord, stand gate in the ways and see." Because if you look, you're looking with the true sense of foresight. We would see. All right. That's why I say in Job, I'm gonna get it real fast. We go back to this.
Mm-hmm.
This is Job. It's Job 8 and verse 8. And it says, For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. For we are but of yesterday, and know nothing, because our days upon earth are a shadow. Shall not they teach thee and tell thee and utter words out of their heart? So pretty much, looking at those days, all right, those ways was proven. All right, if we, look and consider those days, all right, that was the proven way. Whereas, nowadays, this westernization, which is pretty much Hellenization 2.0, these ways don't work. It's pretty much something that's contemporary. It's temporary. It's not rooted in anything. All right,
Mm-hmm.
going back to Jeremiah 6:16, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein." That's because we got none. Walk therein. That's how we are able to continue. Through that light. It says, "And walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls." But they said, "We will not walk therein." 2/3 don't want to walk therein, and that's why they're going to perish. All right, but ultimately, the elect is going to have that true rest.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of. Like, I don't know if you ever watched like these Indiana Jones movies. You know, Indiana Jones would be walking in the path, and the person behind them or that's following them will have to walk carefully in the same steps as he did.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, he's going to trigger a trap, or a snare will get him, or whatever. In the same sense, Yahweh Shai being a trailblazer, we got to walk in the same footsteps that he did. We got to be carefully. We got to look. Okay, he stepped here. He stepped there. We got to follow that path. And
Mm-hmm.
if you ain't following the same footsteps, you can be taken by anything at any
Mm-hmm.
moment. Boom, something can happen. You can get snared. You can get taken away. You can fall in the pit. Whatever. And this is the same thing as that path. You got to look at the path. You know, uh, 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 search which way is right. Because the way of the westernized world is like an unproven, untested method, and I mean it's been tested, but we haven't seen no success in it. So that just shows you that, hey, that this is not the right way. This ain't the path.
Mm-hmm. Eyes wide shut.
Eyes wide
I,
shut. God.
I got this right here. This is Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13. It says, "Enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." And ultimately, you said that Yahweh Shai is that trailblazer, so we ultimately have to follow Yahweh Shai. But going back to the precept that we got, Matthew chapter 6 and verse 22, it said, "Keep thy eye single." So
Mhm.
keep your eye single, keep it focused on the trailblazer. Because in singleness, all right, you focus, but then that word for single also goes into healthy. So keep your eye healthy. How we keep our eye healthy. It's constantly being spiritually renewed. Reading,
Mm.
fasting, praying, and ultimately abiding in the Lord. Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai.
Con.
That's pretty much all I had, bro.
That was it.
Conway, I don't want to Zaza by Naya Apollo as well. That was a beautiful edification through the spirit. While I don't want to Zaza, Adam Yashi, I want to Wablu as well. You all have a good day. Well, we can go ahead and close it out by saying, Call Layim La, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Ruchakodash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that taught this truth and rule well. And much respect to you, bros, that are pushing this truth with all righteousness and sincere. Shalom, 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 lakam, which is peace unto you all. Shalom.
Shalom.